right, ladies and gentlemen, it is Edward Momeka, and this is another episode of Soundbites. And this week, we are here in Build. So let's get into it. So, first thing we're talking about today is we're talking about Azure AI Studio, which went live today. It's now public, anyone can use it. I went down and actually played around with it myself. I couldn't get any of the models to work. It kept giving me an error about my quotas. And it's interesting to me because I actually have OpenAI Studio up and I have demos using OpenAI Studio and GPT-3.5 Turbo. But for whatever reason, I had to make a quota increase request for this. So I don't know if it has something to do with the region or what's going on, but it was a little bit tough. So Obi, tell us a little bit about not OpenAI, sorry, Azure AI Studio, what your understanding of it is, and what it's going to bring to the table.
Well, I think one of the things that I discovered today about Azure AI Studio is the ability to train. And when I say train your models, it's almost a way of actually
I'll go closer.
ensuring that whatever models you have in your data set. So a good example, if you have a scenario where you want to train a model that takes addresses or maybe phone numbers, or maybe you're taking someone like doctor's information. One thing Azure AI Studio gives you the ability to start training these models with data that you actually have posted into that. You can register the models once they actually train. So it's actually a good feature. But me being coming from an area where I focus a lot on APIs, I found that the integration of the AI Studio to the APIs was very, very interesting. One of the things that I was focusing on is how we can extend the Azure AI Studio into basically models that are outside of the ecosystem of Azure. And that's something that they talked about today. They introduced things like extensions, which actually would give us the capability to extend our APIs into Azure AI Studio, which is something that we're looking at doing probably in the near future. And some of the things that you might be aware of now is that they are looking at using Microsoft Teams as basically a client to Azure AI Studio, which was really, really interesting because it allows us now to communicate directly from Microsoft Teams into Azure AI Studio, right? So that's something that's a nice capability that can help us collaborate with more of our team members and actually get value information out of data that we technically can't really see unless we have to go to a secondary data source and pull that. So imagine your data source being as close to you as basically your phone. That's something you have to start thinking about now. You know what I mean? So data is not something that you have to talk to another team about. It's something that you can access through something like a Teams or a chat system or maybe even text on your phone. So that's something you have to start thinking about now.
So I liked AI Studio. I think it's great. Now I'm used to using Azure OpenAI Studio, which is a little bit different. And I think one of the problems that I have with with products that come out of Microsoft is they always come out and there's always confusion, right? And in this case, it's no different. Right now, there's a Copilot Studio, there's an AI Studio, and then there's an Azure OpenAI Studio. And you also mentioned another studio, right? The document one. What was that one?
Azure Document Studio. So
Document Studio.
Yeah, but that's different. That's actually focusing on physical documents and extracting text from them.
But it's AI related.
It's AI related.
AI adjacent.
Definitely AI
and
related.
to me, if you have something called AI Studio, the document capability should be in there.
Right.
Right. It's a central location for doing all your AI modeling, whatever it is. That's what it seems to me that it should be. And unfortunately, it's not. But I did like what I saw, and I could, just quickly taking a look at it here. It has a bunch of cool things. It's got Playground, so you can set up chat. You can set up completions. It does image-related things. In fact, I created an image Playground of myself on a donkey. It's probably the worst-looking thing I've ever seen. I'll post a picture of it. I had 12 hands, 12 fingers on either hand. It also, GPT-4 launched today, so it had all the models there, which I thought was really cool. Trying to think of what else.
And they talked about the Azure Data Store. Remember they talked about that? They were focusing on how you can pull your data from Azure Blob Storage and Data Lake, or ADSL as they call it.
Okay.
And I think they talked about Azure SQL database, how you can inject SQL queries through a backend system. They
Yes.
highlighted that a little bit. So those are kind of the few things that
Through
they
the
talked.
Dataverse.
Yeah, it's a Dataverse.
Through
Yeah,
the Dataverse.
yeah, they talked about it a little bit. So I mean, there's some. I mean, I won't say it's perfect. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. A lot of the products that we saw today may be GA available in the and GM in general availability in near future. So you're looking at June, July for these some of these capabilities we're talking about to be available. So at least we should know by June, July whether these capabilities that they have is fully integrated. Because what we saw basically to me was in the pilot phase at this point.
Yeah, there were,
Yeah.
once upon a time, a long time ago, you would go to build and you would get deep demos and all kinds of stuff where they really get into it and show you how it works. They open up code. I remember a year when almost everybody was opening up Visual Studio and slinging code in right in there and showcasing capabilities. And build came off to me day one, and I don't know, maybe it's gonna get more, more in depth over time. But the today came off to me as basically like a marketing, sales, promotional kind of thing. Like a lot of the quote unquote talks were canned demos that were based on videos, right? They weren't really getting into it, and when they did get into it, it was for very short periods of time. They didn't showcase how the large language models are being programmed or put together. They didn't show how the co-pilots are actually being built. Really get into it. They sort of glossed over quite a bit. But then again, maybe that sort of thing is for. Thanks, man. Maybe that sort of thing is for the labs. So I don't know. But I thought OpenAI Studio, all in all, is a pretty cool. It's a positive. Things are heading in the right direction, and I'm very excited about it. And we'll talk a little bit about the ramifications of that later. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the agents. So we have the co-pilots, but they now have this concept of agents, and they showcased a project manager, you know, on a Teams call or a part of a team, right? So you set up a team in Teams, and you create a co-pilot that's an agent that you specify the role. Hey, I want you to be the project manager and do this, this, and this,
Right.
and then it's like setting up meetings, setting up the agenda, sending messages when people are talking for too long, managing the meeting. Like they didn't show any of this, but they kind of showcase it as a capability of this feature.
Right.
So, what are your thoughts on that piece of it?
I mean, if anybody who's thinking about going into a PM role or trying to get their PMP or anything like that, have to start thinking hard about what's the value proposition of getting a certificate in, I say, PMP today, because PM is project managers are actually going to be going away. That's what it sounded like today from the from Microsoft Build. I'm not sure why they're going that direction, but maybe they're trying to make it easier for other teams like product owners and developers and even to delivery managers to be able to actually get projects in as quickly as possible. It had some of the capabilities that which I saw were very interesting is forecasting, which is one of the biggest things PMs do. They have a budget, they have to forecast, they have to allocate, they have to provide resources
that
to
was a
different
great
job
demo.
titles. The guy even went through one of the demos actually went through a phone call was established at the beginning, and the manager was asking, put in your hours,
Yeah,
which was
I saw that
interesting.
one.
That was very interesting beginning to and normally when this happens to everybody who's been in consultants on Friday, you have to put your hours in. You have to take at least maybe 10 minutes of your time to put your hours in, and you also have to do timesheets sometimes. All those capabilities now have been allocated to basically a PM that's an AI today, and that's what we saw today, which was actually interesting. And one of the things that I saw, which made it really really interesting, is that AI had the capability to connect to APIs. and actually send and receive requests through those APIs based on those conversations that happen inside of Teams.
It had the ability to change data.
Yes, as well.
Remember, he
Yeah.
reduced his hours
Yeah.
through the chat in Teams,
Yes. Yeah.
right? So, one of the things that fell out of there for me, looking at the AI agents and the AI Studio and the co-pilots, and the co-pilot that's built into Teams, is that Teams has now become the face of the enterprise to the individual employee. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
All right. So we talked about AI Studio. We talked about Copilot agents, which are an amazing feature. And another thing that they showcased today around the AI, which you talked about in the Copilot specifically, was us being able to extend Copilots with two things: either knowledge, meaning you add more data to the Copilot, or actions, meaning that the Copilot can connect to services, Azure functions,
Yeah.
Dataverse, or whatever. So that, to a certain extent, is a good thing for us as developers, right? Because you can. There's still an opportunity for you to make money, not just by building co-pilots, which everybody should be trying to build co-pilots and understanding right now, but also by being a data producer,
Right.
right? Can you produce data, right? And can you format it the right way? Or can you produce behavior,
Right.
right? Can you produce services that do this, that, and the other thing? So, for example, I myself, I own FlexPay, and I can continue to use FlexPay as just a website that you can use to go and do your payments. But alternatively, I can convert FlexPay into services that feed into agents or co-pilots that can now allow those co-pilots to incorporate payment into their capabilities.
Right.
Thoughts?
Yes.
How succinct?
Yes.
Obi's very talkative today.
Yeah. I do have some thoughts around that.
All right, go ahead. Let's hear them.
Yeah, so I mean, when you think about what Ed was saying, is that if you take a scenario, I'm a corporation today, I actually produce different variety of software out there, and actually people are using it. Maybe I have 2, 3, 400 subscribers that are coming into my using my product, and then one of the things you have to consider as your product grows and as your subscription grows is how do you support users who are having complexities using your product. Typically, what I would do is I would go and hire a team or maybe 5 or 6 guys that will help me assist in managing the maintenance of my product. Basically, all these questions around how do I use it, or if they have any issues around the capabilities, how do I go about navigating using the product. But guess what? If I have AI now, that information can be handed to AI, and then the questions come out as messages through something like Microsoft Teams. So if I had to hire 4 or 5 people now, I can reduce that number down to 2. So I'm saving costs there. So that's 2 people investments now. I can take one person's investment and use it and put it towards AI, and then I can grow my business. So that's one of the capabilities that the AI is going to provide for us. So that's something that we need to consider when we're looking at AI. What jobs are going to be taken away, and how will it
Absolutely.
benefit us financially as businesses, which is actually a plus for us. So it's an interesting area we're in today, and the area we're in right now is that we're actually moving towards AI. So we have to embrace it, and then we have to figure out what positions people today that are doing help desk and solving problems through phones or even virtual assistants through remote desktop. We need to figure out how to get them in positions where they can leverage AI much more efficiently.
It's funny because when I was starting out young in my career, there was another very huge transition that people don't talk about a lot. Like, people think that this is some new thing. But even in my age, when I was in my 20s, paper was going away. Publishing was going away. People were moving from the idea of having of magazines and paper and that sort of thing to digital content, graphic design, and those sorts of things. And today, you don't think about it, but 30 years ago, there were tons and tons and tons of magazines out there. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Yes.
And I don't even, are there even magazines still? I know there's one or two major ones, but for the most part, it's died down.
Right.
This has gone away. So, what happened to all those people who worked in the publishing industry? What happened to all those journalists and whatnot? How did they survive in the new world once that medium was no longer available? To me, the answer is that they adapted and they changed and they found ways to make money in the new ecosystem. And to a certain extent, I think that's what's going to happen with AI. I think that there are jobs out there. You just have to figure out how to, how to work it, and
Right.
we're gonna have to see how it emerges and how it evolves. Now, the problem with AI compared to those other fields, to me, is that in those other fields, it was a nice gradual shift. It's been what, 11 months since the last Build conference,
Yeah.
and it is exponential growth, right? In terms of like the technology has gone to a whole nother level. So I think the problem that we face in AI, at least as it relates to some of the things that we're discussing, is that the rate that the technology is changing is not is n- is not conducive for people being able to quickly identify how they can transition and shift their focus. It's happening overnight, and it's literally like two builds ago where they were pushing low code, no code,
Yes.
and the guy gave the example of the garment factory and how overnight it just closed
Right.
and everybody was out of a job because they didn't make the shift. Right. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is another thing that was discussed this the keynote was the Microsoft Fabric. And this idea of a centralized data surface that you can pull, you can query, you can call over services, and feeds into your Copilot, right? So your Copilot can actually pull information from the fabric and use it to do things and inform you of things. Now, I have one question for you, and I'm curious to know what the answer is. What is the difference between Microsoft Fabric and the Dataverse? And why do they both exist?
I mean, from my understanding, I think what Microsoft is trying to do, and I don't know whether they're reinventing themselves or Azure Microsoft Fabric was a different meaning back in 5, 6 years ago. But I believe that the reason why they've chosen to go with the Microsoft Fabric is because they're trying to get data ultra central point. So they're looking at data integration. They're looking at data lakes, which is ADSL, which is Azure Data Lake. You probably hear that term. They're looking at what you typically will have is SQL data warehousing, which is basically the warehousing of how you're going to bring data in. And they're looking at things like big data analysis. So they're just trying to get all the data components into one, basically a landing zone, if you want to call it, a place where all the data can land. But also they want to have all the capabilities in place to analyze the data in real time. So they're creating this concept of a data fabric, or what they call the Azure Microsoft Fabric, depending on which one you want to call it. But that's how basically how it works. Like today, if you use Microsoft Synapse for Analytics Store, it has ADF baked in, which is Azure Data Factory. It has Azure Data Bricks for machine learning. That's already exists today. So it's like they're trying to put more stuff into this fabric layer. So you just stay in the fabric layer and do all your analysis, all your reporting, all your pushing of data, all your pulling data in into one specific location. So the value proposition makes sense for corporations who don't want to bounce around and pull data in. But my concern around some of these products that they're building, which is really good products, is just the cost as associated with them. That's something we start
Cost is
thinking
a
about it.
component.
The big cost is a component we have
Yeah.
to take into consideration. One of the things I know is that they have one of the things they talked about is how they handle security around the data. So I think they focus a little bit on PI information, how they can make sure that PI information is extracted from the data that's collected. And I'm not sure they didn't go into demos on how that capability will work, but they actually pointed that out.
Okay. That's great. I mean, I didn't see any demos using Fabric. I did see demos using the Dataverse. I saw extensive demos using the Dataverse. And most of the demos I saw, most of the things related to AI were tied to the Copilot Studio, which is different again from from the Azure AI Studio.
Yeah.
And we're really about taking data from the Dataverse and surfacing that data into your copilots, which ultimately ends up in teams.
Right.
Now, I did ask them, hey, because the idea of a copilot is great,
Right.
but hey, I've got a product that I've created, and I want to use your copilots. I don't want to create my own. Like we've talked about building something like this, right? So I don't
Right.
want to create my own. I just want to use your copilots because it's standards based, but I don't want to use Teams. This is for people in the public.
Right.
So I want an interface that I can build myself that surfaces this data using services. And the flat answer was they don't provide that. You have to go through the bot framework or something like that to get that capability. So they don't have a RESTful API surface area. Maybe they do, again, day one of build, right? But the person that I talked to clearly stated that they don't have a RESTful API service for calling the prompt of your copilots, right? For iterating through your copilots, getting a list of what are my copilots, enable and disable copilots, basically managing your copilots over API doesn't exist right now. What are your thoughts on that? Any thoughts?
Well, I think there's room for me to grow there because, I mean, Microsoft does provide a lot of capabilities that allow us to connect, use API in their own environment. But one of the things I like about what we had in build today is that at least, even though they don't have some of the APIs, at least the developers have the capabilities to build RESTful connectors with API management, which is one of the things that they said that they support. So we have API management today, and you wanted to connect into Copilot, and you wanted to use your own data as an extension point to adding some knowledge base to the existing Copilot, you can do that today, but you have to build that. It's not something that comes as part of Microsoft. So you have to take that into consideration. Now, if you're going to hire a developer, there's going to be some areas, there's going to be what I call them gaps, which they need to be filled to satisfy business needs. And again, I think I mentioned at the beginning of the call is that a lot of these products that Microsoft is putting out and build may not be ready today because it's still in preview, and maybe by the time it's GA, or some of these conversations we're having might change. So that's a very important point that Ed mentioned. How do we extend outside of the ecosystem of Azure to other systems? For example, if I wanted to correct an Oracle database or even a SQL database or even maybe something that's in AWS and pull that data in.
They did
How do
show
I
Oracle. Actually,
additional
there's a talk tomorrow
about Oracle?
that's
Yeah, so that
Oracle
might be
and
something we're missing. Yeah,
Snowflake's.
we want to understand all the databases that business use today because if you go to most establishment that are using Oracle, SQL, Cosmos DB is obviously that ecosystem, MongoDB, and maybe some other NoSQL databases out there, but we need to have extension points into those databases at some point and allow us to at least freely integrate to those databases using our APIs, and then we can extend into Azure AI Studio to pull data in. And that way we can leverage some of the capabilities already out there, like Teams connecting to Azure AI Studio, connecting to data sources that are outside of Azure rather than using their Dataverse. Because of the performance implications of using Dataverse can be a problem. Yeah. So,
All right. So then the final thing, which is not necessarily news, but was news to me at least, is Power Pages.
yeah, that's interesting.
So, what are your thoughts on this amazing product called Power Pages? Because for those of you who don't know, who might be using one-on-one, one-and-one, and what's some of the website building tools out there?
Well, we have
Shopify.
well, Shopify basically is a way of integrating to data with visualization of web pages. So that is similar to that, but I think Power Apps are kind of leaning towards that. One of the things I noticed about Power Applications is that first of all, the biggest win here is external facing. That was one of the biggest problems we had with using things within Microsoft product. They were never trying to externalize their components to outside users of an organization. You had to come in with your Active Directory or Intra ID to log in, and then use all the applications that's internal to into the organization. So what we label those products in IT terms is called back office because it's not really something that you can actually expose to the client. So now Power Pages becomes a front office, or maybe applications that can be used by users. Plus, they support OAuth 2, and they support OpenID. So what that means now is they have LinkedIn, Google, Microsoft, all
Yes.
these OpenID connectors that
Yes.
you're comfortable using. You can authenticate with these OpenIDs and then pull data in. Now, obviously, there's always a catch, right? So the catch is, or in that case, the rub is, you can pull data from your APIs, but you can push data into your data source. So if I have an external data source, maybe it's a Cosmos database, which is NoSQL, or is a SQL relational database, I have some challenges still today pushing that data in. So when you look at Power Pages, not everybody is fully integrated using Teams, using Intra ID. They might want to just use that capability and connect to the existing databases they have. So the integration points haven't been thought through correctly. I think there's some gaps there. Again, this is build. Some of this stuff is still in preview. So maybe by the time they get to GA, they might have some of these things well thought out and come up with better solutions that will actually work for businesses.
By the way, the the constant requirement to use Active Directory or Azure AD or whatever, this central directory repository for some of the coolest Microsoft products is the biggest pet peeve that I have with Microsoft. Imagine using ASP.NET and every time you create a website, everybody who used your website had to have a domain account in your domain. And you had to go and federate it for them to use it or what have you.
Yeah.
It's like, bruh, like Microsoft, open it up a bit. I'm so glad Power Pages, I didn't know this thing existed. But it's amazing to imagine being able to create a Power App and just having it be open to the world. Now, these are not Power Apps. You did say Power App, but we're talking about Power Pages.
Pages, yeah.
Right.
External.
But the benefit of Power Pages is that you can still
Right.
pull the data from your Dataverse.
Right.
So you can still leverage the Dataverse, which means that you can have Power Pages on one side and then Power Apps on the other side, feeding data in from the internal perspective, and then you expose it in Power Pages in one form or another.
Yes.
I actually started creating a Power Page for a website, but what I decided I'm going to do is I'm going to do this as a video coming soon at the end of build, but it's going to be a video where I take a web page that I created a long time ago, static web page for my for ThinkMind. It's just very basic, dumb. I don't even really use it anymore, but I want to convert it over to Power Pages and then start use that as a framework to basically illustrate the things you can do with Power Pages, the way you can surface data in Power Pages, and then of course the biggest deal, the way you can add new capabilities and new capabilities and new capabilities without having to go in and start coding it, in Visual Studio or whatever. So it's a great low-code solution for you. So check out Power Pages because it's really awesome. And then there are API plugins and Copilot Studio plugins, but we're not going to mess around with that because we talked about it already. Basically, it's just, at the end of the day, the plugins are basically just JSON files that extend the capability of the Copilot and allow you to call functions based on certain things happening or allow you to pull data from different data sources. That's pretty much it. It's pretty cool. But ultimately, it all boils down to Copilot development.
Yeah, and there's one good news that came out from this. If we're building what we call custom, they call them custom co-pilots inside of Microsoft Teams. Is ISVs now can get into that space now.
Yes.
So if you're a service provider of some sort to Microsoft and you want to build custom ISVs that connect to your own industry APIs, you can do that today.
Yeah.
So think about a scenario where I'm an external client who has data that's sitting in my database that's not connected to your system at all, and you're within Microsoft Teams, and you want to pull that data in as additional information that you can surface in your environment. You can have a build for a specific co-pilot and put that into your marketplace, whatever that looks like inside of Microsoft Teams, and then you can pull that in, add it in, and then you can start using that to extend capabilities inside of Microsoft Teams. So that's a win there. And obviously, this is something that for those who are ISVs, they can actually make money on top of that. That's a subscription plan. And that was some good takeaways there. So and Microsoft is pushing for that. So that's something that we're going to start considering using within Microsoft Teams, because Microsoft Teams is a big ecosystem. I think they were talking about how many billion or how many is it billion users or
I mean,
using the millions.
there are probably more people on Teams than on
Yeah.
Windows,
Yes.
right? Because there's guys on
Yep.
every other platform using, maybe not more than on Windows, but there's a lot of people on
They'll
Teams.
help on Teams
Yeah, a
still.
lot of
Yeah.
people on Teams. You know, anyone who's got a Office 365 license
Right.
has Teams, whether they're using it or not.
Right.
And I haven't been anywhere, even shops that are not Microsoft shops. I haven't been anywhere lately that didn't have Teams.
Right.
Right. If they had Windows, they had Teams. So you're absolutely right. It's a huge opportunity, and it does segue into our final point, which is the top 10 jobs that you feel are not going to be around due to AI. They're going to disappear.
Yeah. I mean, they're already disappearing. So the first one I always picked up on
Let's
was
start with 10. I want to go down the line, right, with you, right?
I think 10 the one that's already fading away, which people are not aware of, is system administrators. That's an old term. SAs they call them.
Do you think that's fading away because of AI? I think that might just be fading away.
Well, I mean, it's a combination, right? So imagine one of the things that you saw that you noticed in the build was that AI was building infrastructure as code.
I understand that, but
Yeah.
the only reason why, and I had this debate earlier with my wife actually, because I was kind of concerned. I was telling her, "Man, am I gonna have a job in 5 years?" Right? But I think the only reason why I don't put that in there is because system administrators have a hard hat / steel toe boots element to them, right?
Yes,
they
I agree.
literally have to show up sometimes on your, at your computer, right, and do some work. Now, if they ever went to a model of virtual PCs and AVDs and things like that, then that job is obviously gone.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the jobs that have a threat now. So you can look at how DevOps is moving along. A lot of stuff is going through YAML, is going through pipelines these days. A lot of provision of physical machines are going through.
Copilots use YAML, by the way.
Yeah, and Copilot is using YAML. So it's like you almost can't see the roadmap of where things are going to lead up to. So system administrators are something that slow down still delivery of solutions.
They don't fit in anymore.
They don't. So it's like they're gonna have to. That's gonna go. We talked about project management, which is something that is crucial.
So 10, you're saying a system administrator.
I think 10 is. I think
So
because
you're gonna talk to the AI agent, and you're gonna talk to Windows Copilot.
Yeah,
and
Windows
say,
Copilot's
hey,
coming out.
Why isn't this working?
Well, we just saw that today, right?
Okay, but what if Copilot isn't working? Who do you talk to?
Well, I mean, then you have to go back to the original. So I'm not saying that all jobs are going to go away. I think the if you have a company that has 10 system administrator, that's going to be it's a skeleton crew. You're going to have a skeleton crew that's going to be there.
It's not going to be as many.
You're not going to have as many. So it's the same scenario.
And it's already whittled down.
Yes, it is.
It's already pretty whittled down right now.
So that's why I have that on number 10, because we've already seen that.
Yes, I agree with you because
seen that already.
in most of I'm a consultant, so I work at a lot of companies.
Yeah.
Anytime I join a company and I have an issue, they give me an email address.
Yes.
they don't give me a phone number anymore. They give me an email address. Send email to help desk
Right.
to say you have an issue. Then the ticket gets created. Then somebody contacts me at some point. That activity right there, that cycle right there, could all be done with AI. You don't need a person until you've actually analyzed really and understand what the issue is. And if you have Windows Copilot on the computer, Copilot can do a lot of that for you before even going somewhere else. A lot of troubleshooting for you in an interactive manner. Because at the end of the day, that's all the system admin is going to do. They're going to look at what's going on with your computer based on what you say or what they see and make a determination. Okay, I got it. So what's number 9? So you got system administrator.
Well, I think number 9 is that, I mean, we talked about project management. Any kind of managerial position that requires you to manage teams or individuals when it comes to costs, allocations, and when I say cost allocation, resource allocations and project allocations are something that has been a big thing with companies, and because of managing money. So not only can co-pilots manage resource allocation and costs and the amount of hours associated with a project, they can actually make a deterministic view of how long a project will take. So if an individual without a co-pilot can say, okay, this project is going to take 160 hours, and actually demo that, and then the person who's managing the costs can say, well, I only have 40 hours. Plugs that into Copilot. Copilot figures out how to get resources to allocate that 40 hours to get the same project done. Now, what Copilot is doing is intrinsically thinking about, okay, if this project requires me to use Copilot, then I can have a dependence on them to reduce the amount of hours that it takes to get something delivered. So the delivery cycles are going to get significantly reduced because you don't require individuals as many. So it's like you have developers who are actually working to deliver solutions. They'll be more efficient delivering multiple projects as versus one. So their resources are going to
You're
extend.
saying with a co-pilot
Copilot
manager
as Copilot as a manager or as an assistant to
as
help
an
them get
assistant.
things done. So that's something that I would take into consideration. So and it's happening already. I mean, even we had a conversation this morning. We were talking about how teams have become a problem or a solution, depending on how you look at it, because now the average person works more than 40 hours.
Yes.
And there's a concept of always available now, as opposed
Yes.
to being or working on 9 to 5 and walking home. The minute you walk out of the office, no one can reach you. But now you're reached. You can be reached anywhere.
Yeah, fun fact. I had told my company that I was at Build this week, and everybody knows what that means. And you can attest to that. Was I in meetings
Yes.
for a couple of hours?
Well, both in
Yes,
meetings.
both the meetings, right?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter where you're at. Now that they can get to you on Teams, someone is going to reach out to you. It's not like my status was set to speak to me when you want. All right, so number 8. So you got system administrators 10, project managers 9. Now they're not in sequence, so it doesn't matter.
It
You
doesn't
can
matter.
see
Yeah,
that.
they're not in sequence. Yeah.
It's just jobs, right? But we're just doing a countdown to make it a
Right.
little bit fun.
And we're looking at. I mean, I'm looking at DBAs as well. I mean, it's not something that we're looking at right now.
DBA
It's DBAs.
because of
DBAs.
AI though.
Well, DBAs right now, the ones that are managing tuning of your database in terms of performance, indexing, managing your workloads to provide more efficiency, those jobs are still very safe right now because AI doesn't have that capability to do that. It has the capability to retrieve the data. It has the capability to actually help you create SQL statements. We saw that today. I mean, how
I think DBAs became obsolete 7 years ago.
well, I mean, they still tune the base because
have
we
one or two.
yeah, but we have a hard reliance on relational databases today, irrespective of. And I've been in scenarios where companies go back to a relational database because of performance constraints with NoSQL.
Well,
So-
I'm not just talking about NoSQL. Take something like Snowflake. Snowflake is not necessarily is Snowflake NoSQL. It can do everything.
It's a layer
right?
above it. It
Yeah.
provides connectors to SQL database and it can understand how SQL works behind the scenes. So it takes your data and basically creates a SQL-like statement to call databases behind the scene. But when it comes to tuning of a database and making sure it's performance, you still need the DBAs for that. That's not something that AI can take hold of. It's the accessibility of that data that's the key thing that we have to take into consideration. Because
Yeah.
typically, if I want to create a SQL statement to call a database today, and we've done this through developers. When developers back in the day wanted to create connectivities to SQL, guess what they did? Microsoft invented a thing called Entity Framework. Remember that. And now what I did is I severs the connection between you and the DBA. You can create SQL statements in real time and connect your backend systems.
I'm waiting for the world which is coming, where when I want to query a database, I'm gonna type in, give me all the records. I'm gonna write it in natural language.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna be writing SQL.
it is.
I'm
That's
gonna write in
that's my
natural
point.
language, and it's gonna get converted to SQL and
Can
still
convert
bring
to
me the
SQL.
right.
I'm
right?
bringing the right records, right? So that's something that you normally would have to engage with DBA. They have to evaluate a SQL. They probably have to turn into store procedure. There's some
Tune it
time.
in some way. Yeah.
There's some gaps, and that's again it take time. So it's like right now they're trying to reduce that gap between wanting to have it connected to a database by generating SQL in real time.
All right. So DBAs, start looking at taking your skill that you have right now, and instead of selling your skill of doing the work, instead of selling your ability to do, sell your knowledge.
Right.
Right? Create the co-pilots. Create a co-pilot that can tune a database, right? And sell that. So that can get plugged into stuff other people are doing. Create a query optimizing co-pilot, but somehow take your knowledge and find a way to turn that into dollars, because you're not going to have that free for all. I mean, I feel like databases are almost going towards a service oriented world, anyways, right now. Can't remember the last time I installed SQL Server. I use Azure SQL or Cosmos DB,
Right.
right? So somebody somewhere takes care of it. I don't
Right.
care. I don't think about um, transaction logs and clearing the logs and all the things we used to do.
Yep.
I don't care. Or log shipping or those kind of stuff.
That's all gone
It
away.
just happens. All
Yeah.
goes away. All right, number 7.
Yeah, another one I'm thinking of is QA. I mean, QA was never talked about in build at all. You notice that?
Yeah, they didn't mention it
They
at
didn't
all.
even talk about it.
But they didn't talk about developers either. Actually, they did talk
Yeah,
about
talk
it.
about developers. The QA wasn't something. So quality assurance is not something that's considered. If you're going from developer to production or developer straight to user experience, and now we're using low code, no code. The idea of low code, no code is to reduce the need for QA
for
to
QA.
validate your
Anything.
code to ensure that it meets the business value, because you're getting fast response times. Most of the time, you're using products that are built by Azure, so they already tested it, and you're just basically using a tool set.
Yeah.
So it's already tried and tested tool sets. You're just putting it together either through graphs, maybe through orchestration services that I talked about.
Yeah.
And then you do not need QA to actually do an evaluation, because it either works or it doesn't work. There's nothing in between. So that's one job that is, I'm almost 100% certain that in the next 4 or 5 years it'll be gone.
At least it's going to be severely diminished.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
It will
From
be.
where from where
Where
it
it
used
is
to
not
be.
there. But yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what you will have is people that are traditionally using regular connectors, regular developers, and there are companies out there that are going to be slow to start implementing AI. But over the next decade or so, we're going to be looking at some of these positions, especially QA, might be significantly diminished, or at least maybe to be a skeleton crew, like I mentioned. So that's one major one that needs to be taken into consideration.
I think QA is going to meld into developer, because AI is going to be about testing.
Yeah.
Right. So, like when you put your, what is it called, your power page out or whatever, and whatever you create, it's going to be more about the developer themselves going and checking it to make sure it's doing what you want it to do. So I think all these quote unquote developers, as you don't have to sling code as much, now it's more about you reading the code and making sure it's aligned with what you want.
Right.
Like the GitHub Copilot example that we saw.
Right.
Right.
I mean, QAs probably have to move into a thing called set or system engineering testers, which is basically a cross between coding and build automation around tools to test the capabilities. So, for example, if I built a Copilot Power Page today, I want to test the performance of that Power Page against 50 users, 100 users, 200 users. I have to build simulations. And normally you have people that are system engineering testers actually can take care of that. So the QAs will probably have to learn how to get into that space and become much better and more comfortable in that area.
But is there going to be a need for a person that simply just tests things? I mean, I think part of what happens is that job roles get combined. Maybe the project manager becomes the QA, right?
It does,
or the
yeah.
system administrator, right? They're going to get combined, because
Right.
you can't just do that one thing anymore. There isn't enough stuff to do.
Yes, that's the
Right.
thing.
That's basically
That's already
what I'm
happening already. They're asking for a lot of things more. They're asking for a lot more things now, because they know that the amount of cycle times to do this work is actually less and less. And you don't need a dedicated system engineer test or a dedicated QA, because a lot of these products are already coming with pre-built modules that are already being tested by Microsoft. And what you're doing is assembling them and using them like an orchestration service. And that's pretty much where they're going to reduce the need for QA. Yeah.
All right. So what's number 6? We got QA. Sorry, QA guys. I have nothing for you.
Yeah, that's interesting. And what I do, again, to those low numbers, I'm just thinking in my head what else could be out there that we could think about. I feel that another one I feel that might be an interesting one is release management. I'm not saying that release managers are going to go away. I think the way release management are going to be handled releases are going to be significantly more of a coordination amongst teams versus actually how code is delivered into a production environment. Because with the, if you look at Copilot with GitOps or GitHub, that is actually interesting, because now you have pull requests. It actually does a lot more information around the data that you're bringing in. It analyzes your code. It actually makes sure that you're writing good code. There's a lot of things that's baked into Copilot for GitHub.
I actually absolutely agree with this one because I think that the jobs that use quantifiable metrics to basically make decisions, why do they need a human being making those decisions,
Right.
right? Like if the AI can go through the code quality and see that there's no bugs whatsoever and no issues, which only an AI is going to do that faster than anybody else, then why shouldn't it be released?
Right.
Right? So again, it's almost like that combined thing. So now instead of the release manager, it's the CIO, right?
Right.
That's gonna say, "Hey, AI has given a report and says everything is good.
Right.
Security, are you good with that? Are you good with that? Are you good with that? Okay, go no go. It's a go.
Right.
I don't see why you would need someone a human to like elevate something from dev to QA or whatnot. I think an AI can do that.
It does, yeah. I
Definitely
mean, I
can.
just think if you use that with existing pipelines that we have today, whether it's YAML pipelines, they've got built-in stages. So it's more, like I said today, release managers are going to be more coordinated with other teams and understanding what the deliverables are, but not actually helping through the delivery cycle. That's going to be an automated process all the way through.
And by the way, if you're watching and you're feeling, like you don't know what to do or what have you, I want you to look at the things we've listed: system administrator, project manager, DBA, QA, release manager. Go and build co-pilots that do this thing. Right? Go and build co-pilots that do this thing at varying degrees based on various industries and what have you. And don't sell it, don't give it away for free. Put a monthly premium on it, and it is what it is. One way or the other, try to get that money as best as you can. All right, what's number 5? You still got 5 more. You've only gone 5. Yeah.
Testing me now. Testing me.
You know.
So I think another one I haven't talked about is business analysts, BAs, they call them. So BAs are
I'm sorry,
requirement
guys.
gatherers. They go around, they talk to the business. The problem with business analysts is that there's a massive gap between a requirement and implementation. As a developer, if a business analyst has to start a requirement gathering in January 1, they might not have all the requirements by the third week of January. And then they have to still get into a room with you and understand your capacities as available for you to do the work. So they have to take those requirements, break them into tasks, and then put them on the board somewhere. So this is a process involved in not just getting requirements, breaking into tasks. Any developers can take it and kick it off. And then you have to talk about whether all the dependencies are in place. Do we have a DBA? Because requirements require a data source. So we have to get a resource for a DBA. Do we need a UI guy? So a couple of things we talked about was in Microsoft Teams, for example, is that they're moving away from UI. They call it cards. So when you think about what Copilot is doing, is trying to reduce the cycle time it takes for a product to be built. So does the business analyst needs to be required anymore for pulling the requirements now, or is it something that you have a conversation with the AI and it explains to them what you're looking for,
Yeah.
and it spits out a requirement definition? We saw that in Build, where it actually produced full-fledged requirements from just a conversation, and
Yeah.
then you have to just accept it and generate a plan
Based
which is
on that.
based on those requirements.
As a matter of fact, the plan could be generated by the project
Yeah.
manager.
Yeah, yeah, the project manager, co-manager. That's one area that is a lot concerning because BA's jobs are typically eliminated by using co-pilots to some degree. I'm not saying that it's. I'm not saying when I say elimination, I don't mean that everybody's going to go. I think they're going to be the companies that have 10 BAs are going to have a skeleton crew. They're going to reduce them down to 2 or 3 of
Instead
them.
of 10, you only need 2.
two
And that's
rather-
what we're talking about. We're not saying that your
eliminating
job
it.
is going to disappear. But to a certain extent, if you go from, like, for example, I'm sure there's still people working in auto manufacturing warehouses, right? I'm sure there's people still doing something there, but they're not building the cars anymore like they used to, right? Or you might be able to get away with having one person, whereas before you would have had 50 or what have you. So that's all we're really saying. So business analysts, guys, I really don't know what to say about this because, I agree with it. I think that it's a job that's at risk, based on AI, because ultimately, as you put it, pretty much the requirements can be dumped directly into the AI agent, right? And everyone can just give their requirements and it's dumped in. Then the AI agent can actually ask you, hey, which ones do you want to keep? The AI agent can orchestrate the entire thing.
Right.
The entire thing can be orchestrated, right? The only thing that the AI wouldn't be able to do is negotiate.
Right.
But I think in that scenario, we would all be negotiating with ourselves,
Right.
right? You don't need someone to broker that negotiation.
Yeah.
All right, number 4.
I think I'm
Got
right
4
now.
more. You're
Right now, I think product owner is something that we need to start taking into consideration. That works hand in hand
I
with
don't
BA.
agree with that, bro.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
don't
not
think
saying
that's possible.
product owners are probably have to shift what they're doing. So if their title as a product owner requires them to communicate with the developers and translate what the business needs, it has to be more, okay, we're going to use the knowledge that we've gained from the business to feed an AI. So I'm not saying that they're going to go away. I think that they have to enhance their learning skills to be able to communicate with AI, or probably be able to produce AI solutions that would actually be used between the development teams, because they still manage a lot of things. They still manage boards, tasks, stories, a lot of those stuff that still have to be plugged in by them. And that's something that AI can do today. You know what I mean?
AI can do that.
I mean, I'm talking about Jira boards or anything like that. I know they talked about
Why can't AI do that?
one of the things they talked about was Jira integration.
Yeah.
They talk about Jira integration to AI to pull information in, but I don't think they.
All you're
Maybe I
talking
missed it.
about, all you're talking about is data entry.
Yeah, creating tasks,
That's
creating
it.
stories.
That's
Yeah.
all data entry.
And that's what product owners know. Product owners are always the gap between the business and the individuals that are actually doing the development work. So
Product owners only exist. I feel like one thing we got to remember is that when I was a child and I went up to my dad's office and I got on his Mac, my sister and I, we wanted to create a baseball game. And we went on the computer and my dad opened up Word for us, or whatever it was called. What's it called? Word Perfect, something like that. Word
yeah.
Perfect. And we typed out all the rules to baseball. We typed it out like a young child, like it should do this, it should do that. Make the program. That's not a reality. That's actually how we are supposed to interact with computers.
Right.
All the stuff we've been doing all this while is because we don't have that capability.
Right.
Right. But now we have that capability. I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, why would a businessman need an intermediary at this point? You get what I'm saying?
That's what I'm saying. Product owners are one of the ones to consider as well, because the more we look at what product owners do, they own a product, but who owns it? The business says we want to build a product. They talk to the product
The
owner.
business actually owns it.
Yeah, then the business is telling the AI to do the work
Yeah.
and making decisions about what direction to go. Yeah, right. There's no, like I mentioned, there's no really a real desire to keep a product owner. At least not necessarily for the job title they have been paid for, but they have to diversify somehow and get involved in other areas to be more relevant.
If you got as a company a really good AI guy, right, that could tune your model for you based on requirements that you have and things you need, you won't need a product. The agent or the co-pilot is the product owner.
Right.
Right? You just set up a couple of agents, project owner agents, put them on different teams, write your requirements in there, what you want, all the business, and have it just groom and do whatever it needs to do.
Right.
You're right. I don't know if that job exists. I think that's one of the ones that's at high risk, even higher than project managers, because it's a lot easier to do. You can automate that role very well. Questionnaires to your customers, looking at market trends and data, right? Right. Just buy the data and feed it in, right? Requirements that come from that. I mean, that's light work.
Right.
Right? Even a project manager is a little bit harder than that. A little bit harder to whatever. Man, product owners, bro. It's funny because I feel like I'm getting ideas for co-pilots that I'm going to be working on. Yeah. All right. You only got 3 more.
Well, the other one that it will be very interesting and people might not know is secretaries.
Oh, yeah, that's gone.
Secretaries, I'm not too sure what to say about that
that's
one.
gone.
I think that one is kind of eliminated. We don't have a centralized system for calls to come in. Phones have been eliminated. Direct access to people's cell phones, and Microsoft Team has direct ways to make phone calls.
Yeah.
So you take a secretary, or even Yeah, secretary, and they normally, if I had a secretary, I would actually tell, okay, arrange a meeting in the conference room. But now
You're
we
gonna
have
tell your AI agent.
the AI agent takes care of
Yeah.
that. We don't need to have secretaries anymore to make appointments, arrange anything. Now, some usefulness might be coming in, arranging flights, going places. That's useful for those areas, but AI is catching up closely to
AI is
getting up.
catching up, bro.
Yeah, so that's going to be something that secretaries at those positions might not even be available anymore.
That's a co-pilot that someone should be building right now. How do
Yeah,
we integrate Expedia and all these
yeah,
things into your enterprise so that it's easy for you to book flights, book
yeah. But yep,
hotels,
yep.
right? The only thing that I think is still needed is what I will call a very low level office worker that does
Right.
things like set up your printers if you
Yeah,
even need
you
a
need
printer.
printer. Yeah, printers have gone away. Offices don't have
Right.
printers
Yeah. Maybe,
anymore.
some guy, like some eccentric guy wants, but you really only need a worker
Right,
kind of person, right? Set up a room. Like today we're at Build. Someone had to go in and set up the rooms.
right.
But do you need a college educated person to do that? No, you just need anyone to do that, right?
Yeah.
You don't need a person who went to 4 years of computer science or whatever secretary's English majors and stuff like that to do.
Right. And that
Not
one is
necessarily.
personal assistants. I don't know whether they're the same as
That's gone.
secretaries. I
That's
think
gone.
that
It's not the
those
same, but it's gone.
they're actually going to, that's going to be gone as well. So that's those, they fall in line. You know, I mean, the AI is going to be helping you. AI is basically going to be a personal assistant.
Literally, AI is already a personal
Yeah.
assistant, right? That's what
Yeah.
co-pilot, personal assistant.
Yep.
right?
That's a very, very important one.
Yeah, those ones, the two that Obi just mentioned, are gone now. You might actually still have a job, but you're not gonna. It's I don't see it lasting if you're in those two fields because really the AIs right now are at feature parity with what you do in terms of the high skill work that you do.
Right.
The low skill work that you do, why do they need you to do it? They could get anybody to do it for much cheaper,
Right.
right? It's really that simple. Right, what's the last one?
The last one is actually interesting. I just want to talk about that one in more detail. So UX, UI design.
Ooh,
That's
interesting. You don't think that's going to be needed anymore?
Well, I mean, I'm gonna say it's not gonna be needed. I think it's gonna be leveraged less and less. I mean, we already get mobile platforms. I mean, when we had UI guys back in the day building HTML, that was back in the 90s and the 2000s. We had UIs back then that were leading. Then obviously UI guys actually started shrinking when mobile platforms came around. So everybody started going into the mobile apps.
Yeah.
A lot of people were focusing on that. They have companies today. You go to Airbnb, or you go to something like Uber. Their UI is non-existent.
I think I understand what you're saying.
So it's like
I just want to clarify for people. To hold that thought, just so I can clarify. He's not saying that you don't need people to build. We're not going to need people to build web pages because the AI is going to do it for you. He's saying that there's no need for web pages
anymore. It's going away
because they're going to go away because you're just going to have cards and it just
Yeah,
takes
we're
the
gonna
information you need and does what you want. Because at the end of the day, that's all a web page really is doing. It's taking your information in a flashy way. So go ahead. Sorry, I just
and
wanted
they
to
ask
qualify
questions.
that.
I mean, imagine you going to your doctors, like they want you to fill out a form. You have to make an appointment. So and then maybe you even talk to someone individually to understand what's going on with you. It's like AI is going to help you make the appointment. You can maybe even consult a virtual doctor that's AI assistant to get some insights into what's going on. So you have more information to come to the table when you get to that appointment. So it's like it's not going away completely, but I think the assistant with the cards are going to help reduce the need to have UI pages that collect information. I mean, so that's something that's taken into consideration. I actually did that build today. And even if you wanted to build UI, let's talk about that for a second. Even if you wanted to go into that space, Power Pages is one of those things that really, really has got built-in Copilot to help assist. We saw a scenario where a guy did a demo today and said, okay, I want to put some validation on my forms. And you just add Copilot. And guess what? It built code out, and you just have to copy and paste it.
Really?
That was it. Yeah, we saw that. It validated the phone number. Remember the phone number validation?
Yes,
it did that.
yes.
But that was a missing piece.
Yeah.
And he wasn't a developer. He was clearly
Just a
not a
guy.
developer. It was
Yeah.
he was a senior
guy.
project manager who looked at a form, found a missing piece, asked Copilot, helped to build it out. So what I mean by is, I'm not saying they're going away. I'm just saying that there's not going to be a real need for them at scale. You have to scale that down because now a project
Yeah.
manager can go in and choose to build a UI, even if he has no understanding of
Yeah.
HTML, who just
He doesn't
generate
need
that
to.
stuff.
Yeah.
That gets generated.
Obi and I met many years ago at working at Comcast.
Yes.
And at Comcast, the scenario he just described was a one sprint process. Oh, it wasn't even one sprint.
One or two
One or
sprints.
two sprints.
Yeah.
Just add a new field,
Yeah.
right, to the website page. Just add a new field to it. Had to go back. Had to go to dev. Had to be part of a release, right? Then it gets published out there. Then you add that new field, but they forgot to add a special value in there that they want. Now we got to go back through that cycle. And now, as he just said, the project manager just goes in there, add a new field, done. No need for developers, no need for product owners, no need for BAs, no need for anything.
Right.
As long as you get some kind of approval from a higher up, you're good to go. Right? And if you're the product owner, not the manager, but the actual owner, then you actually don't even need any approval.
No.
Right?
That's correct.
You don't even need any approval.
That's correct. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, sir. So we got the top 10 jobs from Obi that he's saying will likely disappear thanks to AI, or maybe disappear is a strong word, be diminished in some form thanks to AI. So impacted system administrator, project managers, DBAs, QAs, release managers, business analysts, product owners, secretary, personal assistant, UX, UI designers will be leveraged less and less. So this has been day one of Build. I'm Edward Momeka signing off. Tomorrow we're going to be going in and we'll be checking out the keynote from Scott Guthrie, which should be pretty amazing, and looking at some other cool AI things. Tune in and happy coding. And as always, have a blessed day.